Imagine yourself in a longhouse, the air thick with smoke and the smell of wood fire. A storyteller, a skald raises their voice, and the world of gods and giants comes to life in the flickering shadows. These ancient tales of thunder and ice, of trickster gods and world-ending battles, weren't first written in books. They were spoken, sung, and remembered. But today, if you want to discover this world for yourself, you'll find yourself facing two ancient doors, two mysterious texts known as the Eddas. They look similar, they sound similar, but they are profoundly different. One is a collection of raw, fragmented poems, the other a carefully constructed guidebook. And understanding the difference is the key to unlocking the heart of Norse mythology. Let's first approach the older of the two, the Poetic Edda. This isn't a book in the modern sense, it's an echo, a collection of anonymous poems passed down through generations before finally being written down in a single manuscript in Iceland, the Codex Regius. Think of the Poetic Edda as the source code of Norse myth. It's cryptic, powerful, and deeply emotional. It doesn't hold your hand or explain itself. It simply is. The poems within are the voices of the gods themselves, the prophecies of seers, and the heroic boasts of legendary warriors. Here you'll find the Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress, where a mysterious figure tells Odin the story of the world's creation, its life and its violent, fiery end at Ragnarok. It's poetry that feels ancient and elemental. You'll also find the Hávamál, the sayings of the High One, where Odin dispenses wisdom on everything from how to be a good guest to the sacrifices he made to gain ultimate knowledge. It's a mix of practical advice and profound cosmic mystery. The style is stark and potent. It uses alliteration and a strong rhythm that was designed to be memorized and performed. The language is filled with kennings, poetic compound phrases like calling the sea a whale road or a battle a storm of swords. Reading the Poetic Edda is like looking at a collection of brilliant fragmented mosaics. You see the epic scenes, you feel the raw power, but you have to piece the full story together yourself. It presents the myths without commentary, leaving much to interpretation, which is both its challenge and its greatest strength. Now let's turn to the other door, the Prose Edda. If the Poetic Edda is the raw source code, the Prose Edda is the detailed instruction manual written by a known author with a clear purpose. That author was Snorri Sturluson, an Icelandic historian, poet, and politician living in the 13th century. Snorri saw the old ways, the old stories, and the complex art of Skaldic poetry fading away as Christianity took hold. He wrote the Prose Edda to preserve them. It's not a collection of ancient poems, but rather a structured textbook designed to teach aspiring poets the art of their ancestors and to explain the mythological background needed to understand the old verses. The book begins with a clever frame story. A mythical Swedish king named Gylfi, disguised as an old wanderer, travels to Asgard to question the gods themselves, Odin in a triple disguise. Through this dialogue, Snorri systematically lays out the entire Norse cosmology. Gylfi asks the basic questions a beginner would have. Who are the gods? How was the world made? What is Ragnarok? And the disguised Odin answers, quoting from the ancient poems of the Poetic Edda to back up his claims. This first section, the Gylfaginning, or the deluding of Gylfi, is the most famous part. It's our primary source for the narrative versions of many Norse myths, from the binding of the wolf Fenrir to Thor's disastrous fishing trip to catch the world serpent. The second part, the Skáldskaparmál, is a deep dive into the language of poetry. Snorri explains what Kennings are and provides a massive list of them. He tells the stories behind them, explaining why, for instance, gold can be called Sif's hair or the otter's ransom. So, while the Poetic Edda just uses these complex phrases, the Prose Edda stops and explains them to you. It's Snorri, the professor, making sure his students understand the material. It gives us the context, the why behind the poetry. The best way to think about the difference is with a modern analogy. The Poetic Edda is like an album of powerful epic songs from a legendary band. The lyrics are deep, the music is moving, but some of it might be a little hard to understand on the first listen. The Prose Edda, then, is the behind-the-music documentary about that album. It's the songwriter Snorri sitting down and saying, "Okay, that line in the third song, here's the story behind it. And that weird chord progression, it represents the chaos of the giants. One gives you the raw art, the other gives you the artist's commentary and analysis. You need both to fully appreciate the masterpiece. The Poetic Edda gives you the thunderous voice of Thor. The Prose Edda explains who he is, what his hammer is called, and why he's so angry with the giants. So which one should a beginner read first? Most scholars and enthusiasts would give you the same advice. Start with the Prose Edda. By reading Snorri's work first, you get a clear narrative framework. You learn the names of the gods, the layout of the 9 worlds, and the basic plot points of the major myths. It provides the map. Then, once you have that map, you can venture into the wild, untamed territory of the Poetic Edda. The poems will suddenly make much more sense. The cryptic references will click into place, and you can fully appreciate the raw emotional power of the original verses without feeling completely lost. Let's quickly summarize the key differences one more time. First, authorship. The Poetic Edda is anonymous, the collected voice of an entire culture over centuries. The Prose Edda was written by one man, Snorri Sturluson, with a specific goal in mind. Second, form. One is poetry, epic, rhythmic, and designed for oral performance. The other is prose, a structured narrative and instructional text designed to be read and studied. Third, purpose. The Poetic Edda's purpose was to perform and transmit culture through art and song. The Prose Edda's purpose was to preserve and educate, to explain that very culture before it disappeared. And finally, content. The Poetic Edda contains the myths themselves in their raw form. The Prose Edda contains explanations of the myths, an analysis of poetic language, and narrative retellings that connect the dots. They aren't rival versions of the same stories. They are 2 different tools for exploring the same magnificent world. One is the artifact, the other is the museum curator's notes explaining it. One is the lightning strike, the other is the scientific paper explaining the atmospheric charge that caused it. So when you stand before those 2 doors into the Norse world, you now know the nature of what lies behind each. You have the ancient untamed poems and the scholarly guiding hand of a master storyteller. Together, they form the foundation of everything we know about this lost faith, ensuring the voices from that smoky longhouse can still be heard, clear and powerful, centuries later.